The helicopter dropped so low it blasted rocks against my boots. No warning, no markings, just a gray machine screaming over my fence line as I slammed a steel post into the ground. Two men in suits jumped out, badges raised, shouting for me to stop immediately. Dust whipped sideways. My tools shook on the tailgate. I yelled back that this was my land, but the tall one stepped closer, blocking the sun, voice cold as metal. "Mr. Holt, you're interfering with something far bigger than you understand." Then he said my exact work schedule, a schedule I'd never told anyone. The tall man didn't lower his badge. If anything, he pushed it closer, close enough for me to see the edges where the final digit looked scraped in with a knife. "Step back from the post, Mr. Holt," he ordered. "This section of land is now under federal restriction." He didn't wait for me to respond. He motioned to his partner, who paced along my unfinished fence, scanning the ground like he was searching for buried treasure. I tightened my grip on the sledgehammer. "This is private property," I said. 230 acres. I've got the deed." The tall man barely blinked. "You'll cease construction until further evaluation. Non-compliance will trigger escalation protocols." Escalation, like building a simple fence, was a military operation. His tone, his posture, too aggressive, too rehearsed. Back in the Army, I'd seen real federal teams operate. They were controlled, methodical, not whatever this was. The partner stopped near the buried cable I'd hit earlier and tapped it with his boot. He didn't ask what it was, he already knew. That was the moment my gut turned. These men weren't here by accident. They'd been waiting, watching, tracking every move I made on this land Russell left me. The same fence line my father started years ago, and abruptly abandoned without explanation. The tall man stepped even closer, lowering his voice. "You keep building this fence, Mr. Holt, and you'll force us to take steps you won't like." And then, almost casually, he added, "Just like we warned your father." The helicopter hadn't been gone 10 minutes before the land went quiet again, too quiet for open Texas scrub. I picked up my sledgehammer, replaying every word the tall man said. "Just like we warned your father." The phrase gnawed at me all the way back to the fence line. As I walked the stretch, he'd been so fixated on my boot hit something that vibrated under the soil, faint, rhythmic, mechanical. I knelt, brushed away dust, and found the same corroded cable I'd struck earlier. It ran perfectly parallel to where I was installing the fence. That wasn't coincidence. Someone had buried something long before I came back to finish what Russell started. A truck engine rumbled behind me. Hank Delaney's beat-up Chevy rolled up slow, like he didn't want to be seen approaching. He stepped out, hat low. "Mason, maybe leave that stretch alone today." "Why?" He kicked the dirt right above the buried cable, his jaw tight. "Because your daddy knew when to quit." My pulse spiked. Russell Holt was the most stubborn man who ever walked Texas soil. He didn't quit anything. And if something scared him off this line, it wasn't weather. The next morning, I returned just after sunrise, hoping to work before suit-wearing strangers reappeared. I'd barely lifted the first post when two dark Suburbans tore across the dirt, stopping inches from my boots. 4 men stepped out, spreading wide like a police sweep. Not federal, too sloppy, too eager. One crouched near my fence line and aimed a handheld scanner at the ground. A rising tone beeped 3 times. He nodded to the tall man, Grant Kincaid, so they knew what was under there, and they were terrified I'd find it first. "Mr. Holt," Kincaid said, "you are now trespassing on restricted federal terrain." I laughed, loud. "You're standing on my land, 230 acres of it. Show me a warrant." He didn't. Instead, his men crossed deeper onto my property, photographing tools, tires, even the spot where I'd kneeled yesterday. Russell's voice echoed in my memory, something he'd said years ago while adjusting a busted gate hinge. "Son, the fastest way to lose what's yours is to let strangers decide where your line belongs." Kincaid pointed at the soil. "You lay one more post, Holt, we remove it. By force if needed." His threat wasn't a bluff. Not anymore. The helicopter swooped in again before noon, the downdraft flinging gravel so hard it cracked my phone screen as I tried to record. I shielded my face, but the display was ruined, spiderwebbed, useless. Kincaid didn't speak this time. He just gestured at my unfinished fence like he expected me to bow to him. Then they lifted off again, leaving the scent of aviation fuel and humiliation behind. Back home, Sophia stared at the shattered phone. "They didn't want you recording them," she said. "That means they're not federal. Real agents don't hide." She marched straight into Russell's old study, pulled his safe open, and sifted through documents. 10 minutes later, she froze. "Mason, look at this." A land access agreement with Ironcrest Dynamics, dated 6 months before Russell died. Except the signature wasn't Russell's. Not even close. This is forged, Sophia said. Whoever wants your land needed paperwork to justify it. This is their fake trail. The landline rang. An unknown number, I answered. Mr. Holt, a flat voice, said your father delayed cooperation. Don't make his mistake. My throat tightened. Who is this? No answer, just breathing. Then a click. Sophia stared at me, face pale. Mason, they think Russell is still alive. Something was very, very wrong. The next morning, a white sedan with government plates rolled up our driveway. A woman and man stepped out wearing navy jackets embroidered with a federal agency insignia. Mr. Holt, the woman said, we're here to discuss impersonators who may have contacted you. Her badge looked flawless, hologram seal, everything. But Sophia squeezed my arm gently. She didn't trust them. Inside, they asked detailed questions, not about my safety, not about threats, but about where I discovered the buried cable, what tools I used, how deep I dug, what direction my fence line pointed. Their interest wasn't investigative. It was operational. When they left, I called the number on their card. Thank you for calling Ironcrest Dynamics, an automated voice answered. Ice slid down my spine. Not only had we been threatened, but now we'd willingly let the same criminals into our home, disguised as federal investigators. Sophia's voice cracked as she whispered Mason. If they can impersonate federal agents this well, then who exactly is running this, I didn't know. But they were escalating fast. We took the fight to neutral ground, the county library. Sophia dug through databases while I scanned the entrance for anyone watching. Found something, she whispered. Mesa Core Resources, an energy subsidiary of Ironcrest Dynamics, had filed geological surveys on government land beside ours, horizontal drilling reports, seismic imaging, a projected resource value $68 million, and the imaging lines extended under our property. They weren't after my fence. They were after what lay beneath it. Sophia kept digging, then her eyes widened. Oh God, look at this. The emergency call reporting Russell's death came 5 minutes before the official time of death. The medical report listed unexplained cardiac irregularities, the same pattern Sophia discovered seen in multiple natural deaths of landowners across Texas, all tied to disputes with companies linked to Ironcrest. My chest tightened. They hadn't scared Russell off. They'd silenced him. Sophia grabbed my hand. Mason, whatever they're doing here, they've done it before, and they're not stopping. I looked out the library window, toward the horizon, toward our land. They think fear will work on me. Sophia shook her head. No, they think you'll run. But they didn't know me. They didn't know the Holt family. The next morning, I loaded fresh steel posts into my truck and armed our land with cameras and recorders. If they wanted a confrontation, they'd get one. Because I was finishing that fence, even if it meant meeting the same fate they gave Russell. By the 6th attempt, the Texas morning felt like it was holding its breath. I set the 27th steel post, swung the sledgehammer, and let the ring echo across the scrubland like a challenge. That's when the rumble came. Low, deep, mechanical. The matte gray helicopter rose over the ridge, banking hard blades, chopping the air. 3 dark Suburbans appeared from different directions, kicking clouds of dust as they accelerated toward my fence line. A coordinated sweep. They weren't pretending anymore. 12 men in suits spilled out before the vehicles even stopped moving. Grant Kincaid led them, his expression carved from stone. No badge today, just raw authority he thought he owned. Mason Holt, he shouted, approaching with his team flanking him. You have violated federal orders. This construction ends now. I laid the sledgehammer across my shoulder. Show a warrant, show a court order, show anything legitimate. He didn't. Instead, he unfolded a thick document and held it high. This is a strategic resource seizure authorization, he declared, loudly projecting his voice toward the cameras I'd hidden across the property. Under emergency provisions, this land is hereby restricted. Read the statute number, I said. He froze for half a breath, just long enough to confirm the whole thing was fake, but he pushed on anyway. You are interfering with classified infrastructure. Leave the property, or we escalate to phase enforcement. Phase enforcement. There it was again. Phase this, phase that. They weren't government agents. They were running an operation. And today that operation was about to hit a wall. Your time is up, Holt Kincaid snapped. This ends before someone gets hurt. He meant me. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the one who needed to be afraid. A truck engine approached, slowly, deliberately from the west. Every suited head turned. Hank Delaney's old Chevy rolled over the hardpan and eased to a stop between me and the Suburbans. Hank climbed out back straight, eyes sharp, no hesitation. He wasn't the nervous neighbor from before. He walked right past me, stood between the criminal task force and my fence line, and pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. He pressed play. Through the quiet Texas air came a clear voice, one every suit recognized instantly. Project boundary line proceeding on schedule. Subject remains non-compliant. Recommend implementation of Phase 3 protocols. Silence. Even the helicopter blades seemed to falter. Kincaid's jaw tightened. "Hank, you have no idea what you're doing." "Yes," Hank said, his voice steady, "I do." Then he lifted his wallet. Not a rancher's ID, a law enforcement badge. Hank Delaney, Texas Ranger retired. Currently assigned to a joint federal task force investigating mineral rights fraud, impersonation of federal agents, and landowner coercion across 3 states. Kincaid staggered half a step, not back, not forward, just enough to show the cracks in his armor. Hank continued, "We've been building a case on Ironcrest Dynamics for 18 months, and you handed us Phase 3 intent on a silver platter." One of the suits reached toward his jacket. Hank didn't flinch. "You might want to rethink that. Because this isn't just audio, son." He nodded toward the mesquite brush. 6 figures emerged. Real federal agents. Real jackets. Real credentials. No theatrics. No bad scanning equipment. No altered badge numbers. And then Sophia stepped out behind them, holding a tablet linked to our hidden cameras. "Your entire confrontation," she said, voice echoing across the dirt, "has been streamed live to government servers in 3 separate jurisdictions. Every threat, every impersonation, every illegal order." I saw it sink into Kincaid's face. His Operation Project Boundary Line was dead, but he wasn't done fighting. Not yet. "Destroy the servers," Kincaid screamed at his men. "Wipe everything! Go to Phase 3! The suits scattered, rushing for the Suburbans. One ran toward the helicopter, yelling into a radio. Another tried to yank equipment from the ground, data drives, communication modules, whatever they'd been using to monitor the buried cable. But as they reached for them, real agents intercepted. "Federal agents," one shouted. "Hands where we can see them." The first arrest hit the dirt. Then another. Then the man trying to start the helicopter was pulled backwards so hard he dropped his headset. Kincaid bolted, sprinting toward the chopper like he could outrun the entire justice system. But Hank stepped into his path. "You're done, Grant." Kincaid swung a desperate, sloppy punch. Hank caught it with one hand. "Your father," Kincaid hissed, "should have cooperated. He didn't get to finish." 2 agents tackled him, pinning him into the dust he once thought he controlled. Cuffs clicked. His wrists were no longer free. Sophia's hand found mine. "It's over, Mason." But it wasn't, not yet. Not until I finished the one thing Russell had never been allowed to finish. I walked back to the 28th post still standing in the ground where Kincaid's men first told me to stop. I lifted my sledgehammer. The air felt electric, like the land itself was watching. One swing, then another, and another. Each strike rang louder than the last. Kincaid screamed behind me as agents shoved him into a federal SUV. But I didn't look at him. This fence wasn't about him. It was about my father. About truth. About taking back what had been stolen from our family long before I knew the fight had begun. On the final strike, the post seated deep into the earth, straight, solid, unmovable. A fence line completed. A legacy reclaimed. A criminal empire undone in broad daylight. I stepped back, breathing hard, dust swirling around my boots. Sophia slipped her arm through mine. "Mason, look!" I turned. Across the hardpan, real federal agents gathered equipment. Hank watched quietly, and Kincaid's convoy pulled away under armed escort. For the first time in years, our land felt like ours again. But the wind carried one last whisper, a reminder of how close we came to losing everything, and how far I was willing to go to protect what Russell Holt left behind. The dust from Kincaid's convoy hadn't even settled when the world finally went quiet again. The helicopter lay still, its blades frozen mid-glare under the Texas sun. Real federal agents were packing away evidence. Hank stood beside them, arms crossed, watching every detail with the calm certainty of a man who'd waited years for this moment. I stayed where I was, hand on the last steel post, the one I'd driven into the ground, moments after Kincaid's arrest. The metal was warm, solid. It hummed softly in the wind, like the land was exhaling for the first time in decades. Sophia walked up next to me, brushing dust off her jeans. "You did it," she whispered. But the truth was heavier. "We did it," I said, "and so did Russell." For a long moment we didn't speak. We just stood there, letting the silence settle over the fence line, the same line Kincaid had sworn I would never finish. The suits he commanded were in handcuffs, now heads bent, anger drained out of them the way heat drains from cooling steel. Across the stretch of wire, real agents laid out seized equipment, scanners, encrypted radios, signal repeaters, soil probes, everything. Ironcrest Dynamics had buried beneath our land and disguised as federal infrastructure. It was a graveyard of lies. One of the agents approached us, nodding respectfully. "We're transporting Kincaid and his men to a federal facility. Hank will accompany us for continuity. You're safe now, Mr. Holt. Safe." The word felt unfamiliar, almost fragile, but hearing it here, on the dirt where Russell took his last stand, meant something deeper than safety. It meant truth had finally taken root. As the agent walked off, Sophia exhaled shakily. "They'll open criminal proceedings from here," she said, quietly slipping back into her attorney cadence. "Multiple charges, multiple jurisdictions, no way they crawl out of this." Her fingers grazed the barbed wire, careful but certain. "They won't touch this land again." I looked across the desert where sunlight shimmered over the steel posts, stretching straight and unbroken toward the horizon. My father had started this fence with good intentions. He just never stood a chance against a machine built to bury him. Ironcrest had forged documents, staged investigations, faked credentials, manipulated neighbors, killed opponents, and buried millions of dollars worth of stolen oil beneath government excuses. But now their entire operation was unraveling in the dirt at my feet. Sophia's voice softened. The agents confirmed what we found: the geological surveys, the horizontal drilling. They found the original data files in Kincaid's equipment, enough proof to dismantle everything Ironcrest built. The weight of those words settled deep in my chest. Not relief. Something quieter, a kind of steady, grounded justice. Hank approached, then stopping at the far side of the post, as if he knew this moment belonged to us first. "You should know," he said, voice low, but steady. "Your father never backed down. Not once. He fought them as long as he could. You didn't just finish his fence, Mason. You finished his fight." I forced down the tightness in my throat. "He didn't deserve what they did to him." "No," Hank agreed. "But you made sure they'll answer for it." Behind him, real federal agents loaded crates of seized tech into SUVs, living proof of a conspiracy that had finally been dragged into the sun. Ironcrest Dynamics was done. Mesa Core Resources was done. Project Boundary Line was over. And the land was ours, legitimately. Permanently. One agent raised his voice across the clearing, all evidence secured, convoy moving out, engines rumbled, doors slammed, tires crushed gravel. Then one by one, the vehicles pulled away, leaving silence trailing behind them, like a long shadow, slowly disappearing. When the last engine faded into the distance, only the fence remained. My fence, Russell's fence. A line drawn through Texas hardpan that criminals spent years trying to control, only to lose it in broad daylight. Sophia slipped her hand into mine. "What now?" she asked softly. I looked at the fence steel posts catching the sun wire, singing in the wind, everything straight and solid and open. That fence wasn't just boundary anymore. It was testimony. It was proof that real authority comes from truth, not badges carved with lies. "Now," I said, "now we let the land breathe." Sophia leaned her head against my shoulder. Hank stood nearby, the faintest smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the Texas wind sounded different, lighter, cleaner, almost gentle. I rested my hand on the last post and let the moment settle deep. The fence stood, the truth stood, and the Holt land, our land, was finally free. Final line. In the low whisper of the wire, I swore I heard Russell say it again: "Some fences are worth every fight."